Let's talk about the Nasdaq 100, stock symbol QQQ. Easing trade tensions between the U.S. and China. There's going to be a 90-day pause between the two countries. After that, it could go back up again if there's no real headway made between the two countries. China has agreed to lower the tariffs from 125% to 10%. U.S. has agreed to lower theirs from 145% to 30%. So some progress on both sides. As a result, the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq specifically gapped up 4.1% today. The Nasdaq or the S&P 500 was up 3.25%. Still, between both of them, huge moves. So what does that mean on the charts? What does that mean? Do we go back to all-time highs? What I'm going to do in this video, I'm going to break down the technicals for you so that you have a better understanding of what we can expect going forward and how you can react and position yourself for as much. So let's go ahead and get into those charts right now. First off, you have this massive support level. This goes all the way back to the 2021 highs. Lo and behold, nobody knew at the time, but that was essentially what the market found support at. That is where the market ultimately bounced at. But what does it mean going forward with this huge rally that we've seen that's 26% off of these lows from April 7th? The rally off of the April 7th lows has been to the tune of 26%. Now you have this double top pattern here. This is the first top. This is the second top. And you have where it confirmed at was this level here. A lot of people were looking at this retest of the double top to be a potential area where it would reverse and push back down to the downside. Instead, it gapped right through it. Didn't even have to test it. It gapped through it overnight. Now, what that means, though, is that it could make its move back to the all-time highs. But if you notice here, there's a lot of choppiness that has taken place. So while it may break back up to the all-time highs, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to break right through it. In fact, what I could see happening right here is where we get into more of a trade range here, unless we're to break back down to the downside. If we break back down and this is just a temporary pop above this previous resistance level, then all is off the table there. You also have a massive gap that has now been established, and we know these gaps ultimately do get filled for the most part. I'd say about 90+% of them do get filled. So you have that underneath. So if this one keeps on moving to the upside, expect some resistance right there at the all-time highs where it formerly had that double top. Now, where it gets a little bit more interesting is this rising trend line off of the 2023 lows. Now, it doesn't look like much because we broke below it, and then the trend basically became useless. But not quite, because oftentimes these broken trend lines will act as resistance going forward. So we had it where it tested it multiple times. We came down to it, tried to bounce off of it back in early March. We broke below it, tried to recapture it again, fell back apart once more to create lower lows. And then now we're back on the upside 26% later, and we're just above this level. If you zoom in close enough, you can see where we are just above that level. But kind of like what we saw back in late March, we also broke above that for just a little bit. And so I would watch that level. Does this hold in the coming days? We haven't necessarily gotten a lot of separation. It's not a definitive break, so definitely worth keeping on your radar. Also, the AVWAP. This goes back to the beginning of the year. The AVWAP anchored to the first trading day of the year. You can see where that acted as some consolidation for price just above it, and then finally it made its move well off of that AVWAP level today. Furthermore, you have the AVWAP off of the all-time highs. That was broken long ago. So both of these are now key support levels going forward. I would say look at 2022 with me real quick. And the reason why I say that is because one of the things we saw back then was a significant move off of the lows as well that made it look like the whole sell-off was done and over. We formed a double bottom. We confirmed that double bottom right here. And we moved to the upside. We even broke back above the 200-day moving average like what we did today. And we also broke back above the highs, creating a higher high from February 2nd of that year. We broke above that only about a month and a half later. Eerily similar timelines here. So you look at what we're seeing right now with this market, not quite a double bottom. Some people would say that it's a similar bottom in the sense that we had some large candles there and that we did essentially base around this area. However, what we did do is we broke above this previous lower high, and then we formed a higher high. So we also broke above the 200-day moving average. What you want to look for now is do do what we did back in 2022 and start immediately reversing, filling this gap, and pushing back down to the downside. I think there's a lot of different ways to look at this market. Those arguing that we're out of the whole trade wars, there's all these other countries that we're going to be making trade deals with. This was the big kahuna. China was the big one. That's one of our biggest trading partners. And that's the one that the market was focused on. That's where the tensions were escalating. Now that that's out of the way, what other news can they come out with? Maybe some smaller countries, sure. But what is actually going to drive the market higher from here? And that's really the big question you have to ask. Earnings wasn't that great. There was a lot of companies that struggled on their earnings. There was a lot of negative revisions as well. That's continuing to pick up speed. You're seeing consumption starting to struggle. So there's a lot of things to be concerned with, especially from an economic standpoint, on whether or not we're going into a recession, that I would be very mindful of in the days, weeks, and months ahead. If you enjoyed this video, I would encourage you to like and subscribe. Let me know down in the comments below, what is your take on this market move today? Do we go right back to all-time highs, or do you think this was an exhaustion gap where we're coming right back down once again? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys, and God bless.